Most of you know that for the past 3 years, I've been working on a book called The Family First Entrepreneur, which is published by Harper Collins. Now, I've been getting a ton of questions about the process of writing this book, so in this video, I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes look into everything that I did to get this book published by a traditional publisher and receive a six-figure advance. Now, you'll learn about the exact process that I use to attract a Big 5 publisher and my process for hitting a national bestseller list. So let's start with the why. Why did I want to write a book in the first place? Now, contrary to popular belief, I knew that writing a book wasn't really going to make me life-changing money, and it probably won't even have that much effect on my business. And this is, I'm just guessing. And if there is a payoff, I knew I wasn't going to see anything for at least 3 years. So my purpose for writing the book had nothing to do with the money. And even though I did get a six-figure advance for writing it, all that money, literally every penny of it, went back into marketing the book. Now, I had 4 main reasons for writing it. 1, for some reason, I've always had writing a book on my bucket list. Now, I don't really consider myself a writer, but I wanted to officially publish something at least once in my life. And along those same lines, I've always dreamed of walking my kids through a Barnes & Noble's and showing them my book on the shelf. And next Tuesday, I'm actually going to do this, and I'm super excited. Now, the third reason was that for as long as I've been doing business, my mom has never really understood what I do for a living, and as a result, I don't think she's ever really fully appreciated what I've done as an accomplishment. But when I told her that I was going to publish a book, she got all excited, because for the very first time in my life, it was something that she could relate to because she buys books all the time. And my mom is actually going to be here in the Bay Area for my very first book signing on May 18th at Books Inc. in Palo Alto. You guys are all welcome to join, by the way. Incidentally, over at mywifequitherjob.com/party is where I'm going to be throwing all these book parties later this year. By the way, in the event that you see my book in a bookstore, please snap a photo of yourself with it, email it to me, and I'll send you an official Family First Entrepreneur t-shirt. I'll have a form set up to automate everything, which will be located over at mywifequitherjob.com/shirt. Now, the last reason, which was kind of an afterthought, was that everyone has been telling me that a book is a great lead gen for my other businesses, and that all the work would pay off with increased respect and credibility. Now, supposedly, having a book can lead to more speaking engagements as well, which I'm actually not that interested in. Now, I can probably be bought, but it would probably require a lot of money for me to want to go around and speak. Which leads me to the next question that I've been getting asked. Why go traditionally published versus self-published? Now, for me, self-publishing was never really on the table. In order to get your book into a Barnes & Noble and have a chance at hitting a national bestseller list, you pretty much need to be traditionally published. Now, while self-publishing will probably make you more money, money was never my goal. It was pride. It was ego. If I was to publish a book, I wanted to be published by one of the Big 5 publishers and hit one of the national bestseller lists. And in a way, this entire process was just like getting into college. When I was young, I knew I wanted to go to Stanford to study electrical engineering. So I figured out what I had to do to get in, and I executed. Getting a book publishing deal was no different. When I first started on this book journey, I knew absolutely nothing about books. So the first thing that I did was hire someone who knew a lot about books, my buddy Jeff Goins. Jeff is a best-selling author of many books, and he's probably one of the most talented writers that I know. We actually randomly met in 2015 at FinCon, and he was one of the keynote speakers. And I enjoyed his talk so much that I bought his book, which he signed. I actually still have his book on my shelf right now. And at the time, I had no idea that I'd ever work with him again, let alone ever even see him again. But things in life always seem to happen by accident. And I'm not sure if I've ever used this analogy on this YouTube channel before, but I always think of life like playing the lottery. And the more people that I meet and the more work that I do, the more lottery tickets I get. And if you are able to amass enough lottery tickets, then good things are bound to happen. Jeff was just one of those lottery tickets that allowed me to hit the jackpot. So let's talk about the process. The first step was figuring out what the book was going to be about. Now, most people start from complete scratch, which ironically I think is actually easier. When I first spoke to Jeff about this book project, I already had about 800 blog posts of about 3,000 words each, an online course with over 400 videos spanning over 100 hours of content, and 350 plus episodes of my podcast and a bunch of YouTube videos. That's a ton of content to go through. The problem was organizing that information because the topics were all over the place. I had posts on business in general, posts on e-commerce, posts on philosophy, parenting, investing, you name it. So the first piece of the puzzle was actually putting everything on the table. I literally just dumped all my content to Jeff and his team, and they started going through it. And from there, we had a bunch of in-person meetings to sort everything out and talk it through. Now, I didn't want to just put out any business book. After all, business books are all a dime a dozen, and I didn't want to put out a book that had already been written before. So I focused on my story and why I was different when it finally dawned on me. Most business books today are written by single guys who have no responsibilities in the world. Their priorities are to grow, 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 and they have the time to hustle and work 80 hours a week because work is their priority. Now, I've interviewed over 450 entrepreneurs on my podcast who are killing it online. But what most of you guys don't know is that many of the guests on my show aren't really happy in their personal lives. They're killing it in business, yes, but not necessarily with the rest of their lives. And I literally just got done with an interview with a very successful entrepreneur who's in the middle of a divorce. I once interviewed a billionaire whose biggest regret in life was losing his family because he worked too many hours. Now, was I the only one who just doesn't want to work that hard? And am I the only one who just wants to be a great dad and spend more time with my kids? So I asked around, and it turns out there are a lot of people just like me out there. We don't want a business to become filthy rich. We want to start a business to be free. And to make enough money to be free can be easily done without working 80 hours a week. And in fact, I am able to run 2 7-figure businesses working less than 20 hours per week. So that became the theme of the book, Family First Entrepreneurship. By the way, you don't have to have a family to take advantage of the book. Essentially, the book is about working less and making more. Now, the next step in the process was putting together a book proposal. I actually looked at it the other night, and while I was looking at it, it was pretty hilarious. The proposal was literally 49 pages long, and it was divided into the following sections. Highlights about the author, about the collaborator, marketing and publicity, about the book, the market and the audience, comparable titles, an outline, and a sample chapter. Now, creating this proposal literally took about a year. And then after the proposal was created, I hired an agent to pitch the book to the big 5 publishers. Now, the advantage of having an agent is that they already have relationships with editors at the big 5 publishing firms. So my agent shot the proposal around to his contacts, and I met with a bunch of different publishers via Zoom to see if my book was a good fit. Then we set a date for each publisher to submit a bid, and on that date, we picked the winner. Ultimately, I decided to go with Harper Collins, mainly because of the editor Hollis. Hollis had worked with Gary Vaynerchuk and a ton of different authors in the past, and we got along great. By the way, if you guys are curious about the actual book contract, I'm happy to share with you the terms in a separate video. But in a nutshell, I got a 6-figure advance, and I get royalties of roughly 15% per book sold. Now, after the contract was signed, it was time to start writing. With the help of Jeff, I was able to pump out the guts of the book within about 9 months or so. And basically, we molded a lot of my existing material into cohesive chapters, and then I recorded audio to fill in the blanks. And incidentally, that's how I write a lot of my blog posts these days. I simply narrate into Google Docs and then edit the output. Once I had my first draft, I sent it over to the publisher for editing. And I've heard a lot of horror stories in the past from friends where their editor forced them to change or cut out large portions of their book. But that definitely was not the case with Harper Collins. There's only one time where I made some Asian jokes in the book. If you guys know me, I rip on Asians all the time. And they suggested I remove it. And since I was making fun of China, I decided to remove it because I do go to China and the Canton Fair every other year, and I would hate to have my book blacklisted over there. Anyway, writing the book was probably the easiest part of the process, the most tedious, but the most straightforward. The final step of the process is where I'm at right now, marketing and the launch. Now, let me start by saying that selling and marketing a book has probably been one of the hardest things that I've ever had to sell. The book is only $30, but it's actually harder to sell than a $2,000 course or even a $1,000 ticket to an event like what I do for the Seller Summit. And here's why. In this day and age of video, social media, TikTok, people just don't read books as often as they used to. In 2022, only 288 million printed books were sold total. Contrast that to YouTube, where 5 billion videos are watched every single day. And don't even get me started on TikTok and social media. The average TikTok user spends 1.5 hours per day on the platform. There simply isn't as much of an attention span these days to read a book that takes several hours. People just prefer short-term dopamine hits. And only 48% of adults finished a book in the last year. Anyway, you all know that my goal is to hit the bestseller list, which is no easy task. You have to sell 5,000 to 6,000 books in a single week in order to hit it. So I hired a book launch coach. Now, I'll probably have him on my podcast at some point, But navigating the crazy world of book publishing and bestseller lists is a whole episode into itself. First off, those 5,000 to 6,000 books have to be hardcover and sold in the United States for it to count. Ebooks and audiobooks don't count, which is kind of backwards since so many people consume content electronically today. Now, my book launch coach told me flat out not to sell the book at all. Instead, sell the bonuses and throw in the book, and I took that to heart. Right off the bat, I offered 3 incredible bonuses worth $690. My 3-day workshop on how to get started with print on demand, a 2-day course on how to make money with content, whether that be through blogging, YouTube, or podcasting, and my 6-week Family First Challenge, which starts in June, where I will walk everyone in a private Facebook group on how to find their next side hustle. And it's funny, when I first launched these bonuses, I might have sold maybe 100 books total, at which point I knew that this was going to be a major uphill battle. Now, basically, I had a 4-prong attack to sell books. 1, I had the bonuses, which I just talked about. In addition, I launched an expiring bonus every single week in the month of April to create a sense of urgency. And this worked really well, by the way. People often need a kick in the butt to take action. 2, I went on a bunch of podcasts. Now, fortunately, I developed a lot of friends with popular podcasts over the years, and I've had them on my show. So for this launch, I basically called in a lot of favors, and at one point, I was recording like 4 podcasts per day. I don't recommend this, by the way. It's both draining and exhausting, and it still remains to be seen what effect it will have on book sales. But regardless, going on a lot of podcasts at the same time is great for creating buzz around your book. 3, I worked with a bunch of close friends to have them blast their email lists announcing the book. And then 4, I worked with any company who has ever sponsored me in the past to buy books in bulk and have them distributed to their audience. Basically, I would record videos, do sponsored ad reads on the podcast, or write blog posts in return for books, and then the company would just give them away to their list and pass me a set of physical addresses for books. Every book sold has to have a unique person or IP address associated with it, and you can't simply buy 6,000 books or else it won't count towards the bestseller list. And that's what made this particularly challenging. There are ways to buy yourself onto the list. For example, an acquaintance of mine spent $1 million to run ads to move books for the bestseller list. And there was no way in hell I was going to spend more than my advance to promote my book because I'm cheap. Anyway, here we are just a couple days out, and I'm pretty close to my goal of 5K books. Every book counts though, so if you haven't ordered the hardcover version yet, I would love your support. Now I must say that this whole experience has been extremely rewarding. There have been people who I haven't heard from for years reach out to congratulate me or to help me push the book, and it's been extremely gratifying. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this mini peek into my book publishing journey, and I hope to meet all of you at one of my book parties. First one is in Palo Alto, California on May 18th. The rest can be found over at mywifequitherjob.com/party. And just make sure you pre-order the book now over at thefamilyfirstentrepreneur.com. Now that you know how I publish my book, make sure you watch this video here to learn how to publish a book without writing any words at all.